but we'll leave it on. You can't go.
Good morning. Welcome you to the South Carolina Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Commission meeting. Beautiful day outside. Welcome to all of you. At this point, I would like to call on Commissioner Rotten to give us our notice of meeting statement.
Statement of announcement. A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the May 18, 2017 Commission meeting was mailed May the 16th, 2017 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office, video conference locations, and on the website. Americans with Disabilities Act, the public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thanks, sir. Call on Commissioner Harlow for the invitation.
Sure. Lord, we come to you today asking for your guidance and support as we begin. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion and allow us to work together as a group. Fill us with wisdom as we make decisions that will affect the special needs community. And continue to remind us that all that we do here today is for the pursuit of truth and for the service of the citizens of South Carolina. We ask these things in your name.
Okay, let's introduce the guests, and we start in the left rear, my left, back of the room. That would be great.
Good morning, Sean Keefe, representing the Columbus Organization.
Hi, Long County Disabilities and Special Needs.
Stephanie Williams, County Delegate. Lisa Weeks, DSN.
Jerry Miles, Coney DSN.
Mike Keith, Marion Dillon, DSN.
Bob Jones, Blueberry DSN.
Ann Dolphin, DSN. Melissa Ritter, DSN. Corey Rawls, DSN.
David Rothhaus, University of South Carolina, Center for Disability Resources.
Deirdre Blake Sanders, DSN.
Tim Smith, the Greenville News.
Good morning, Dorothy Goodwin, Community Options. Suzanne Lyman, Project Hope Foundation, serving the Office of Community.
Joe White, Cherokee County DSN.
Pat Maley, DDSN.
Ray Miller, DD Council.
David Goldman, Sargent County Disabilities.
Carolyn O'Connell, greetings from Greenville County.
Good morning, Kevin Kobe, DDSN.
Deborah and Kevin McPherson, County. Lori Unum, Autism C.
Linda Lee, Witten Center Parents Club, Regional Centers with PAG.
Joyce Davis, Brain Injury Association, South Carolina.
Kathy Martin, Protection and Advocacy for People with Disabilities.
Steve Jones, DSN.
Audrey Farrell, DSN.
Anybody else come in after we started?
Dan Red, Carlton County.
Brent Parker, Allendale Farm.
Philip Wilson, State Senate.
Welcome. We'd like to have an adoption of the agenda. I'll need a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Beautiful. We're going to go to the approval of the minutes of the April 20th, 2017 Commission meeting. We need a motion. Second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Help me, cool. Carolyn O'Connell.
Good morning.
Right.
I have two subjects that I wanted to hit on briefly this morning. The first is I went back and did some reading on Carver governance. Let's see if I can say that. And I wanted to tell the commissioners some of the really important facts that I found. It says one of the common misinterpretations of Carver governance is that boards should not involve themselves with detailed understanding and/or monitoring of the organization's activities. Carver is clear that boards remain accountable to their owners, and I don't know if y'all know who the owners are. I'm an owner. Everyone in this room is an owner. Everyone in the state's an owner. For accountable to their owners for all operational details and must therefore control them. Delegation of the board's authority to the CEO, which would be Beverly, can become an abdication of the board's responsibility to control all organizational actions. Delegation can become an abdication if it occurs without supervision. Now, I'm going to segue that into med administration. We had the issues last fall about the agencies not following the proper procedures, training, and taking care of our consumers when medications are being given. I went on the DDSN website and I found the paperwork that's given to the agencies before they go in to do a review. And I found the key indicator for med administration, which is A1-15. Board provider follows procedures regarding medication technician certifications programs. Now, to the boards, when they go in, they give them an outline of what they're going to come in to see, what they expect to find in paperwork. First of all, they want to see the documentation of how the certification courses are being given. Then they want a roster of all medication technicians employed with the board. Then they have to make sure that a medication technician training certificate, they have one for each of those employees on the roster. Then they also ask for a record of annual refresher courses, the attendance of the staff, because everyone that gives medication has to go back and constantly be retraining. The reason I'm reading this to you is because when we had the problem last fall, the only corrective action I had heard was there had been a memo sent out to boards. But I think y'all need to address that problem at a higher level. For this NDDSN here, for them not to have known what was going on at the agencies, there's only two ways it could have happened. One is Alliance isn't doing their job and getting the information and providing it. And if they're getting the information and providing it, it's not being reacted to here. Now, the reason I'm tying this in with the governance and how y'all are responsible for everything in the world is because when the agency gets sued for a medical problem, if it should rise to the level that somebody comes in and goes, well, why weren't these employees trained? That's one of the things that we're looking at to pursue with lawsuits, who all we sue. So when it comes to that, then they go, well, DDSN, why did you not know this? And then the next level it goes up to, the suit level can go to y'all, because they can go, the commission is not doing their due diligence. And I think it's SOP, it's standard operating procedures. In a business, that kind of answer that you don't know would never, ever get by. If I'd ever gone to my boss about something that was crucial, one of the key factors, because that's what that sheet says this is, it's a key factor. If you didn't have a working knowledge of your key factors, they would go, well, what am I paying you for? But I would like to thank y'all for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Next up, Jerry Mize.
That's a handout, you want to. Thanks for allowing me to speak today. I've been in this position before about the intake process and requesting that it be sent back to the counties, which was done, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the commission and DDSN for allowing that to happen. However, and by the way, I'm speaking on behalf of Oconee, not any particular group, just Oconee. We still have some issues that I wanted to bring to light about the intake process, but in particular the screening process. And but I'm not just going to want to talk about the problems. I do want to talk about some proposed solutions that we, myself, and some of the staff in Oconee feel like need to be done. So you have that in front of you. Problem number one, the screening process is not effective. Callers are not really being screened, therefore intake workers are doing intake on people that are obviously not appropriate for DDSN services. You can read on about, we do not provide, Oconee does not provide TBI, or case management for TBI. Anderson County does that. But one was sent across to our intake worker as an ID, intellectual disability. It turned out they were TBI. We also had another lady that was screened, was sent to Oconee to find out that she had autism. After all the work was done, our intake worker was paid. She had autism, not autism, I'm sorry, asthma, which, does not, is not one of the disabilities that the DDSN provides for. So our proposed solution, better trained screeners that are asking appropriate questions to determine if a referral for DDSN is justified. Screeners that can determine the appropriate category and offering choice of provider for those that serve that population. In this case, TBI versus ID. The other problem, intake workers have no support from DDSN and do not know who to contact for technical assistance. No one wants to accept responsibility for intake. Everyone passes you to another person and everyone provides a different response. Proposed solution. DDSN should create a list of people, contact information, and area of responsibility regarding intake so the intake workers can obtain assistance if needed. Problem. The process remains confusing to people trying to seek services. People have to make a choice for an intake provider, then for a Medicaid targeted case management or a state funded case management provider. People think that they make a choice for intake provider at the beginning of the process that will remain their provider. The letters sent to people from DDSN are not easily understood and are often ignored, which delays services. Solution. People should make the choice for provider for intake and Medicaid targeted case management and state funded case management at the same time, eliminating the need for DDSN to mail out costly letters that are not effective and often ignored. Problem. There's not consistency regarding placing people on the waiver waiting list. Some people get a letter from DDSN asking them to check the boxes for the waiver program that they want to be on. People have to return this letter to DDSN. Some people get the letter, some do not. Some send it back, some do not. People are not being placed on the waiver waiting list like they should be. Intake workers need to know if someone has already been placed on the waiver waiting list or if they have not. Solution. Intake providers should be assisting people with this. Being added to a waiting list is very important for people. If DDSN can add people to the waiting list when the person checks a box, then we think the intake workers should be able to do the same. This should be and could be a part of the intake process. Next problem. Intake workers do not get paid for the time and effort if a person decides not to go through with recommendations for additional testing. Intake workers have already completed the intake process and sent a packet to DDSN later to find out that more testing is needed. If intake workers are not able to have the person agree to this additional testing, or if the person does not follow through with the testing, then the intake provider is not paid, despite doing the work. Our solution, intake providers should be paid regardless and not financially penalized for something that they have no control over. Last, the online screening process option is very difficult and is not family friendly. It's great that we have this option, but it really needs to be redesigned to be more user friendly, which would hopefully encourage more people to use it. Our solution is redesign the online screening option for it to be family friendly. Consider having a person with a disability or their family member to help design this process, so that it can be created with their perspective in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Mr. Pierce.
Good morning. The Commission Policy Committee has met 3 times to discuss the Commission's policy related to approval of procurements following the release of the 2014 LAC audit. The Commission's current policy is that any contracts of $200,000 or more for a fiscal year are to be reviewed and approved by the Commission. I would urge you to amend policy 800-03CP so that procurements above the state director spending authority are based on the full contractual amount, not fiscal year, as recommended in the 2014 LAC report. Legislators passed state legislation this year protecting the rights of individuals with disabilities to ensure that persons with disabilities are not denied the right to parent or to have custody of or visitation of a child because of a disability, and to prohibit child placing agencies and adoption service providers from denying persons with a disability the right to access services because of the person's disability. While this legislation protecting the rights of individuals with disabilities to parent was being considered, DDSN was seeking the authority to make healthcare decisions like abortions, DNRs, and other healthcare decisions for those unable to consent without the involvement of their family by having legislation drafted to exclude them unless they had sought legal guardianship. House Bill 4013 proposed to add back the line dropped in 2016 to the Adult Healthcare Care Act, giving DDSN authority to make healthcare decisions when individuals with disabilities are unable to consent, as well as move the order of priority of DDSN from last to third above the family. Ms. Mull explained last month that the line was dropped when the Act was amended in 2016 as a result of a Scrivener error. However, if that were the case, then House Bill 4013 should reflect that the line being added back was due to a Scrivener error, but it doesn't. For that reason, after last month's commission meeting, I called and spoke with a legislative staff member that was knowledgeable of House Bill 4013. She indicated that she was not aware of a Scrivener error. I was also told that DDSN staff put in writing requesting the change in the order of priority for DDSN from 8 to 3rd. This was done without the knowledge and or approval of the commission. It appears from last month's discussion that the DDSN staff recommendation changing the order of priority was made for the convenience of DDSN to avoid having to go to probate court. Parents and advocates were not upset with the line being added back, but rather the change in priority being proposed for DDSN, which appears to have been a result of the recommendation of DDSN staff. I would publicly like to thank the Commission for taking the position that the line should be added back as it was prior to the 2016 amendments. I also support your recommendation that all changes to legislation pertaining to DDSN be presented to the Commission first before DDSN staff approach legislators and our legislative staff. I would recommend that the Commission amend its policy 800-03CP to formally reflect this change in policy. It's been my experience and observation that it's too easy for recommendations made during commission meetings, even if recorded in minutes, or forgotten once commission members rotate off the commission. Should House Bill 4013 be approved with the line added back, giving DDSN last priority in making healthcare decisions for individuals with disabilities unable to consent, then an additional amendment needs to be made to the Rights of Clients with Intellectual Disabilities Act. Currently, the rights of individuals of Individuals with Disabilities Act 44-2650 makes reference to DDSN and the Adult Healthcare Consent Act prior to the 2016 amendments. That line no longer exists. The Rights of Individuals with Intellectual Disabilities Act should be amended to reflect 44-66-3010, not 44-66-38, if the line is added back to the Adult Healthcare Consent Act, listing DDSN as last priority following family members. The Adult Healthcare Consent Act 44-60-38 currently refers to the grandparent of the patient, and 44-60-39 refers to any other adult relative by blood or marriage. Thus, the line giving DDSN priority should be added back as line 10 in the Adult Healthcare Consent Act and references such in the Rights of Clients with Intellectual Disabilities Act. These two acts should be consistent in their references to DDSN and ensure that DDSN is last in priority in making healthcare decisions for individuals with disabilities unable to consent after family members. DDSN's Directive 53507-DD, last revised in May 2014, is currently in violation of the Adult Healthcare Consent Act. DDSN is operating off a directive that has no legal basis. What is most disturbing is that the DDSN administration has known for many months that the line authorizing DDSN to make healthcare decisions for those unable to consent was dropped, yet they failed to notify providers until after last month's commission meeting and after being asked to do so by some providers. It appears that DDSN administration would rather protect the staff involved in the failure to provide oversight of the 2016 amendments made to the Adult Healthcare Consent Act, as well as their intentional acts to change the order of priority assigned to DDSN in House Bill 4013, than protect the interest of individuals with disabilities and their families. My husband is a dentist. He has to have a dental and drug license to practice according to state law. If he failed to renew his license because his renewal got lost in the mail, or he forgot to renew his license and continued to practice dentistry as if he still had a license, he could be held liable for breaking the law. DDSN directive does not have authority above state law. Similarly, any healthcare decisions being made by DDSN for adults with disabilities unable to consent for the past 11 months and or in the future are being made without proper legal standing or authority unless the probate court is contacted. The department, the commission, and its providers could be potentially liable if this is not done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Okay, any updates from the commissioners?
I have one short one.
As part of Disability Awareness Month activities in Anderson, they plan to take an annual photo at a different location each year. The plan is to frame and send the pictures to local city and county leaders, highlighting the community and the individual's place in the community. In future years, they also plan to invite community members and partners to join their growing family photo. I just thought that was a really neat idea. That's all.
Thank you. Right over here. All righty. Next up is the nominating committee for the slate of officers for the commission. And I have appointed Commissioners Broughton, Barnwell, and Sue to come together with that and hopefully be ready by the new meeting. Thank you very much. State Director's report.
Okay, last month we did our first, I guess I'll call it a trial run at video and audio recording the commission meeting. We do have a recording, but the sound quality is not real great. So we're trying a couple other things. In the meantime, we are checking with like the state rules and regulations on what is considered an official record and how long that needs to be retained, in what fashion it needs to be retained, and we'll come up with a directive specifically saying how long we will post it in a public setting, how long it will be retained by the agency versus how long it will be retained by archives versus at what point, if ever, it will be destroyed. And so we're working on those details, looking to see if other state agencies do recordings, and so we're not reinventing the wheel. They have policies with regards to that. So we're gonna see what, we're doing a couple things different for this meeting to see if the sound quality is a little better, and also looking at what's the best platform for posting it for Jill Dill to put on from her computer at home and view it. And so it's a work in progress, but we're still working on it. We've been asked by providers several times, and I think we're gonna send out a memo, hopefully by tomorrow, with regards to the anticipated $9 million for increasing direct care staff wages. The conference committee is still working their magic, and I think they're meeting at 11 o'clock. So we also, while we have no reason to believe that this is a bone of contention in the budget, but at the same time, we don't want to put the cart before the horse and send out any communications prematurely before the state processes has the opportunity to actually complete their process. We do have an agenda item about this a little bit later, and so Tom will talk in more detail, but our intent, assuming that nothing changes that we're not anticipating, our intent would be that the money for the direct care staff wages would be included in the initial contract for the providers, correct? And so in the 2018 contract, which is, you guys as commissioners generally approve that in June, and we issued it towards late June so that providers have it for a July 1st start date. So for the providers out in the room, it is our intent and hope that as long as nothing goes sideways with the budget process that we're not expecting, that we will be able to load that amount in your initial contract award as opposed to having to do an amendment that we had in previous years, because this year, for the first time, the legislative process is happening slightly earlier in the calendar year, which allows us the opportunity to do that. But again, we will be sending a memo to that effect, but wanted to make sure everybody and the commission, because I know a couple of you have asked me about that. We sent out previously to the commission and to our stakeholders, pretty significant memo came out from CMS with regards to the final rule, extending the timelines. The deadline was 2019, and now the implementation deadline, they've stretched those timelines with some qualifications and limitations, but they've stretched that timeline to 2022. And so that gives states and individual providers a little bit more breathing room in how to come into compliance. At the South Carolina level, this has not changed the site review process that's going on from PCG. That's the contracted entity that was hired by DHHS to do the site reviews. As of this morning, there's 165 site reviews that have been completed. So that process is ongoing, and that process is an assessment. So think about extension into the timeline. You still need the assessment to know what you need to change in your system and what you don't, but they're just giving us a little more time to figure it out. And so with conflict-free case management, also sent communication a couple times about that. DHHS for South Carolina has chosen what's referred to as an individual choice model, which means that the decision on conflict-free case management will be made at the individual level as opposed to the entity level. So as long as a provider is not providing a direct service and case management for the same individual, that's considered conflict-free. And so that is a pretty significant change from prior discussions and the prior path that DHHS was on. DHHS has indicated that plan, though it is in a skeletal form, has been blessed by CMS, and that would be considered compliant. And so now we have to work out the operational details, probably one of the biggest things being the timeline. We have had conversations with a handful of providers as well as DHHS that the way our current QPL system is set up, a QPL has to choose, do I provide case management services or do I provide any and everything else? And so if we're going with an individual choice model, then that means we're gonna have to go back and revisit that dichotomy and possibly change that decision, which would mean a change in the RFP. And so that's a pretty heavy lift and a pretty substantial decision that needs to be made, and we'll probably make it in conjunction with DHHS and providers. Also, if that happens and it's with the individual choice, there are current boards that have not chosen to go outside of their native county. They can provide both services currently in their native county, but if they want to go outside, the state rules and regulations require that they go through state purchasing and go through the RFP. So there's also boards that are saying, hey, under this new model, I want to provide case management to people that I don't provide direct services to, so I want to provide it in my neighboring county. So they would have to go through that RFP process too. So we had initial conversations with DHHS, make sure that they understood as far as any timeline in the implementation of the individual choice model, that they are aware that the RFP revision and application and approval process needs to factor into that time frame. And so all of us are working on it. So that's kind of where we are right now. A couple good things to report within the system. I think there was a news article in the Upstate about this, and then I also shared it, but Project Search, which provides internships at Baptist Eastley Hospital, and it's a joint project through Pickens, the local school district, both rehab and the Pickens DSN board, looking at finding, so they do an intensive prolonged training with young adults with a disability who are aging out of high school, and this was an initial project and a new thing, and so their first cohort of people, they have 100% employment. So in taking as a disability service agency an employment first philosophy, this is a really good example of it takes a village and successful in getting people employed. So I want to make sure that I get kudos to that. As mentioned previously in the public comment, House Bill 3538 passed, and this is a law that is protecting the rights of individuals who are parents who also have disabilities. So it requires DSS, law enforcement, courts, other entities to protect the rights of people with disabilities. That they're not denied the right to parent merely because they have a disability. Prior to the passage of this law, it was actually indicated that the mere presence of a disability was just cause to remove parental rights, even without the incidents or evidence of abuse or neglect. And so this is definitely a step in the right direction. Some of the state advocacy agencies, ABLE and the Disability Council and a lot of other really helped advocate for this. So this is a good step and a movement forward. Another good thing, Think First, which is a preventative effort. It's a nationwide program, but in South Carolina Health Injury Prevention does a Think First program. They do receive one of the prevention grants from DDSN, which is why I mentioned it. They received a national award for outstanding research with regards to their prevention efforts. So that's a kudos for one of the programs here in South Carolina. Also, in response to last month's commission meeting, we have revised the directive that relates to the adult healthcare consent, and I think it was just sent out this morning. So that is consistent with the existing laws and rules and regulations in our state. And so we've changed that. There are also two other components that are either in the General Assembly or who have very recently passed that has to do with some changes in the guardianship and some changes in the durable power of attorney. So we will be reviewing that over the next month or so and seeing if that necessitates any changes or amendments, but we wanted to go ahead and get this out with regard, so it may be a multi-stage process. So we're looking at that. A couple other things that may have pretty significant implications for state agencies is there are changes to the South Carolina FOIA, Freedom of Information. And so, again, still in that process, trying to figure out, but that's going to have, there's a couple versions, but that's going to have some pretty significant potential implications for state agencies in ensuring compliance with that FOIA. So once there's a final version of that, we'll need to look at that as well. As we've mentioned previously, the budget process is on the tail end, so Tom will talk about that a little bit more in the agenda item. And last but definitely not least, there is a newly recommended commissioner for the DSN Commission. She is Lori Unum, and she's here today if you'd like to wave. And so she is well known and a strong advocate, particularly for our population of individuals with autism. And so Senate Medical Affairs will have their meeting next Wednesday, and so she'll go through that first stage, and it is possible, possibly even likely, that the Senate will, before they break for the year, try and clear the decks and approve all pending appointees. And so by next month's commission meeting, it is possible we will have a new commissioner. She's for District 4. And so that means that our illustrious chair, term who was over last year, doesn't have to come every third Thursday. So that's everything I have for my director's report.
Thank you. All right, let's get to business. Susan?
Good morning. If you turn to tab 3 in your binder, I have for you a summary regarding the IDR waiver renewal update. We received this report directly from the Department of Health and Human Services and was updated just to provide the most current information for you all, to provide a status on where we are with the renewal. As you know, we've been waiting for that for quite some time, back in late fall of 2015. I know that sounds like a long time, and we definitely feel like it has been. So I wanted to just discuss the 5 major obstacles that have been reported to us from DHHS as they experience the submission of documents, received questions from CMS, and the back and forth that happens there, because they are, of course, the owners of the waiver program that we operate. So their first obstacle focused on the use of CMS contractors. So the federal agency delegated a lot of the work regarding our particular waiver renewal to a series of contractors that were unfamiliar with waivers. And so while they had training and they had some experiences, they did not have apparently enough experience to be able to fully understand the documentation and the details and the nuances and the decisions that need to be made. So of course that requires kind of on-the-job training, with the state of South Carolina providing a lot of support for them to understand. So it created a lot of additional questions. I think we stated prior that, you know, there were pages and pages of questions that had sub-questions along with them. So, I mean, into the hundreds of questions that were submitted and then responded to, and then additional questions came back and forth. So that created, obviously, some delays. And then additionally, some of the questions would have a financial component. I believe in the past there was, you know, some question that was posed whether direct billing was a part of that financial component. DHHS assures me that that was not the case. However, the financial components with, of course, the budgeting, the planning, the expansion that has to go into those documents, because a waiver is renewed every 5 years. You have to kind of look at first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. Those questions went to DHHS's ancillary reimbursement team, and that's a fancy way to say they have a lot of folks that really can consider the impact of financial requirements and planning. And so that team is not a very big one. And so DHHS also had some processing time issues with just the labor of all the other things those folks were doing. So that's one of the major delays, and I understand it to be one of the very biggest ones of all these major delays. The second being the public notice process. So the Department of Health and Human Services had to complete the traditional public notice process for any changes that may take place when a waiver is renewed. So after they completed that, CMS changed those public notice requirements. So then there was a delay because the Department of Health and Human Services had to complete the public notice process again. So there's another time issue. Third, there were new federal regulations and requirements that in the process of completing the renewal, CMS determined it would be important for that renewal document to incorporate. So those were listed as conflict-free case management. Dr. Shamey just gave you all a nice update on where we are with that. So some of those decisions are just being made yet in this last spring. Also a focus on person-centered planning. And then, of course, sections related to decisions made on the home and community setting side, as we talk about that almost every meeting. So all of that had to kind of be, those sections had to be added, submitted, question and answer about those, and you understand that through booklet. So that took some time because those decisions hadn't all been made as to how the statewide transition plan pertains to the final enrollment card. The fourth obstacle focused upon the CMS review process. So as I understand, DHHS experienced a variety of technology problems in interacting with their platform at CMS. So that caused another bout of delays. And then fifth, we all know we had an election that changed a lot of the administration at the federal level. And so there was a time when communications at the state level were frozen for that period. And then also with the transition of the administration, CMS focused on just those projects that were considered on the clock. That means they had already been put in this window of time that's required for approval of documents, if that makes sense. And so our waiver process, our waiver renewal, because it was still in that question and answer request for additional information process, hadn't been put on the clock. So we were kind of at the back burner. All the on the clock, time limited projects got priority where ours hadn't reached that stage yet. The good news is that CMS had, we think, completed their question answer request for additional information process. And so it's very favorable that at this point that they had requested that the waiver renewal officially be submitted. So on May 3rd, it was submitted. And so what that means is now it's on the clock. And so we have typically a 90-day process unless they determine to take it back off the clock. But it's usually a very favorable status to be in when the CMS requests for it to be put on the clock. And because of the extensive exchanges with CMS, they feel like that will be renewed much quicker than 90 days. So that concludes my report on the waiver renewal.
Questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Susie.
May I stay?
You may stay.
All right, so we're in tab 4 with my report on, I don't have any slides for this one, with my report on the waiting list reduction efforts. So what you see in your binder is 4 traditional chart pages that you see every month. And then we've also included two additional sheets, which I'll focus on. So we continue to see along the bottom row of the first table that we've removed 13,000 names from individual waiting lists since the inception of the project, with 11,000 individuals reaching some final determination, and then we have 2,000 individuals in pending. So later on towards the end of this report, I promise it won't be long, I'm going to also ask Mr. Pat Bailey to come up and talk a little bit about some of the work he's been doing, focused on an analysis of the waiting list and the pending status. So he'll just speak for a couple minutes about that. So at this point with our update, we are seeing a duplication rate between the IPRD and the CS waiting list of about 25%. So 25% of the names on the homeless list are repeats. So I'll add that for your interest. If we move to page 4 in your report, obviously there are a lot of data points there, but if we move to page 4 in your report and focus on the bottom graph, so this one right here, I just want to talk about that for a moment and just reflect. So we continue to see in the dark bars in the bottom graph that the majority of people in the unduplicated numbers waiting for waiver services are receiving other services, but they're also under 21. And so if we look back to prior to the waiting list project beginning, a lot of those folks were over 21. So we've seen a dramatic change in population, just to kind of be reflective for a moment, as to who's requesting services, who's waiting for services. So our system typically, as we're not getting appropriations every year to reduce waiting lists, those folks on the waiting list were older people. And so now we're realigning and looking at processes reflective of, how does that change and how does that reflect because of that younger population. So we continue to see that of those individuals waiting at 5,216, the majority of those are under 21 and therefore would also be receiving another service. such as school services, et cetera, and you see the asterisk information. And then, as a breakout to the right of that, those individuals waiting for DDSN services, you know, they could actually be receiving some other Medicaid service, but based on our access and information about those individuals, we think that the true number that would have less access to services while they're waiting for waiver services. And then the new chart is page 5 that you see, and it's entitled "Percent of Individuals on a Waiver Waiting List Previously Offered a Waiver Slot." So, as I mentioned, we've been engaging in a deeper analysis of waiting lists and pending processes. Why this is important is because we're trying to get to know those people that are waiting. So we've increased our waiting list management processes. We've got some planning in place to have some discussions with the Department of Health and Human Services about any policies that will help us manage waiting lists differently, and then also focus on how slots are allocated. Because what's happening with the individuals here for the community supports waiver waiting list, the bar on the left, what this reflects is that 30%, that upper part of the bar, have already risen to the top of the list and had a waiver slot offered to them, gone through the stage of the process, and then asked to come back again. So they've been to the top of the list, and then they say, but either I'm not eligible for services or I decline services, but I want to stay on the list. So then they go back again. And so then our community supports waiver waiting list moves fairly quickly, as we shared in the past. So then they come up to the top again, and then they might do the same thing. They might be determined ineligible. They might just decline services, but then they might have to go back on the list again. So we're seeing the repeated names, as well as obviously the duplication within the number. So that while you see to the right in the IDR even that percentage of those, as you see the percentage is fairly different from the 30% to the 7%. We still see a fair number of those individuals that are also requesting to go back on, or have had some situation where they've had to decline services at their current time. So we have a lot to do to try to further understand how to better manage what's going on with the waiting list, and how to get people enrolled in waivers in a more streamlined fashion. And so we asked, as you all know, the last few months we've had Mr. Pat Maley on staff to focus upon executive project management, and one of his projects that we've asked him to work on is really that deeper analysis and study. So I'm going to ask him to come up and speak a little bit about what he's been doing and kind of the direction we feel like we may go based on that analysis. You want to come up here?
Oh, I can stay right here.
No,
I'm gonna take the mic from you.
Yeah, come up
Sure.
there, it's been there for the recording.
Before I get going, I want to thank Jerry from Macomb County. There's Jerry, right? Yes. I'm looking at the DDSN eligibility process, as well as the waiver slot awards. And most of what you said resonated with me, and I'll get you afterwards, because I'm looking at it from the number side, but I'm also seeing everything you're talking about. So I think there is opportunity to improve that process as well. As far as the waiver process goes, I was asked to take a look at it just from an efficient, effective standpoint. And there are opportunities to improve it. We're not quite done our analysis, but I think some of the things that would interest the commission would be just how, what's under the numbers, what's going on in the systems. And the first thing I did was I took fiscal year 15-16, just a population of CS and ID waiver awards, just to see what's going on and how they roll into actual enrollments, how many people roll out of the system, and really just the capacity of the system to process the high volume of transactions. And the pattern that I'm seeing that are kind of in all the charts you're seeing is basically in the CS waiver, you're getting over 2,000 applications in fiscal year 15 and 16, and about 35% of them actually end up in enrollment, which means 65% of them are being pushed into the system, with most of the work being done by case managers. And who are the case managers out there? I have it just seems like there's such a capacity issue in the field to process these cases. And some of the patterns that Gary mentioned, maybe not sufficiently screened, is causing extra work for the case manager. So I think, and then we look at this year, the pattern is even a little bit more egregious in the CS system, where for every 4 people that get processed through, 1 end up in enrollment and 3 end up in removals. So we have a lot of people in the system that ultimately remove, a lot of they self-select themselves out, they decline services. But I think one of the areas that we're looking at, how do we develop procedures that balance a lot of competing needs as to how do we screen early, how do we educate early? I think that's a very big issue. And how do we help the case managers process the unique circumstances so that we can get people to decline services earlier with the right education to free up the case manager to get cases through the system. So a lot of it is just procedures that we can do to speed up the process, help educate people earlier, and I think a lot of the problems is just due to the bubble effect of all this new money into the system. And so we don't want to make radical change because that bubble will end in 9 or 12 months. But at the same time, even when we get to the finish line, there's a lot of things we can do to take maybe some of the frustration out of the system for the consumers as well as the case managers and the staff. So we're working on that. I think we should have something in a month or so. Anything else to add?
That was great.
Good. Any questions or?
On the waiting list the last few years, we've gotten $26 million from the state. And then, so that would equate to over $100 million with the federal money added to that.
89.
Okay. What percent did that increase our capacity? Where do we start with that? Did it increase at 25? Would it have been, what was our budget for without that money?
Total dollars, it's probably gone up about 80 or 90 million dollars in our total budget outlay. That's what you're asking?
Well, what I'm asking is, have we been able to increase our services by the same percent as the new dollars that have come in?
We're still doing that.
We're still working on that.
Right, still got pending, 2,000 people in pending status that are awarded a slot. In fact, we're talking about that we're trying to get into the service.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to figure out is, how much bang for the buck did the legislature get out of that, and where are we? Are we 50% there? Are we 75? Where 50?
Oh, I'm just saying that's a good question.
Oh, okay.
I think we're more than 50%, right? So it's not 100%, it's between 50% and 75%, somewhere in that ballpark.
And we've had to use the money because we haven't been ready for capacity because we weren't ready for all this.
I think the constraint is the case manager's capacity in the field. And it's also our ability to make their job easier. And some of the procedures that we have, this is from an outsider coming in, we're a very customer-friendly organization, very customer-friendly, and we bend over backwards. But when you have that much, 75% of people are in the system that won't get to the finish line, it's slowing the system up to get services to the people who are still online.
That's that bottleneck started before it was moved back to the counties, right? It's not a responsibility. What's the
intake, yes.
But moving the intake back has not been.
There's several.
There's several processes, and I looked at the intake, and it might have some of the same symptoms, but people aren't waiting for the services in the waiver system that is so critical to get that moving.
Yeah, where it is connected, Commissioner Thompson, is what Mr. Mallon was talking about with, the population looks different. And the fact that we've got so many under the age of 21 now, where 5 years ago we didn't, and who's coming and knocking on the door because there's been a lot of publicity about all this money that we received. And so our population of people knocking on the door and then they get on the list, that population has changed, and then we changed the intake process. And I'm glad, Pat, that you mentioned that, because I actually mentioned to my director's report, I forgot. But, we already started looking at that and we definitely wholeheartedly agree with some of the feedback that Jerry, gave in public comment, and some of the things we're already working on and some of the things you brought to our attention, so we appreciate that. And so, but it is connected in the intake in the sense that just the population of who's coming to seek services is looking structurally different than it did 5, 10 years ago.
I'll just add a couple of things about the intake process too. So I just want to be clear, I don't have a nice diagram for this. I like diagrams, but establishing a person's DDSN eligibility is helpful because that same diagnosis that has to be documented is how folks get into waiver services. But DDSN eligibility processes don't prevent somebody from getting enrolled in a waiver. You know what I mean? Like the eligibility happens at a time, and the speed of that doesn't prevent them from getting enrolled in a waiver. That's why we're saying they're kind of separate. And you asked that question, and it kind of struck me. And then, the dynamics of DDSN intake are also that, if people want to apply for DDSN services, that's their option. It's not been the position of the agency to say, while we know you, I'll just use asthma, or, while we know you're saying you only have asthma, but if you still want to be considered, then we're going to consider you because we felt like that's something that has been the right thing to do. So that is part of why those anecdotals happen. And then I guess maybe third, my point is because of the policies required by the Department of Health and Human Services and CMS, there's also not a screening prior to being added to waiting lists, okay? And so, as we've said before, anybody with any financial status, any disability or lack thereof can enter the waiting list. Yeah, so as Pat talked about, 75% of people who were processing for waiver enrollment fall out, I mean, they don't reach enrollment. One of those reasons is because some of those people have already been determined ineligible, or they have asthma, but they still want to go through the process and reach that ultimate determination. And they've been waiting for quite some time, so they're quite committed to it. So it's a very dynamic, hard to explain process, and we continue to try to make it as simple as possible to explain and to implement, but that's why those clarifications.
So how close are we to the cap?
So I don't have an update on that. I don't know if Tom does. Last month it was around 300. We still got flexibility there. And as we work out some of these possible advancements with the Department of Health and Human Services, I think we'll be able to reflect on if that additional slots can be released. But I guess I want to say, in conversations as well, we don't foresee that there is going to be additional waiting list reduction money next year. So while we can make some good educated decisions on, the statistics of those individuals and the 2,000 people pending, that, a percentage of those are not going to ultimately be enrolled, we do have to be fiscally responsible in making decisions about releasing additional funds. Would you like to add anything to that?
Other than, like Dr. Singh has spoken to several times, that when we do get the ID waiver renewed, the gist of all this is try to roll the Q sport waiver and ID waiver into one big waiver to get us out of this game of people moving the Q sport waiver into the ID waiver, and then we got to back to the Q sport waiver with people. This a continual cycle of people circulating out of one going to another until we get one waiver that handles all that population group. We're going to have this problem. So hopefully the renewal takes place with the total HHS, they're going to move forward with that. So it'll take time, but that'd be a great goal to come to some kind of finalization.
Yes, I think that's a good point as well, and updates from Department of Health and Human Services on that. We bring it up on our agenda list every month, and they're having some staffing changes as well, so they're hoping to begin some work on that preliminarily in the fall of 2019.
Thank you.
Okay. I have one more small item, on this report before I ask to present the next report. And this is a, update on the pervasive developmental disorder, waiver. As you all know, there's a lot going on in the world of autism with waiver services and autism state plan services. So I'll just briefly share that there's an update in your, binder pertaining to that. So there's a lot of movement because, parents and providers have a lot of questions about the new autism state plan services that will serve individuals for a longer period of time. The PDD waiver had a 3-year service span for children. And now that age range will stretch up to 21 after July 1st, autism state plan services should begin. And so children who are enrolled in those services can continue in services until entitled to 21. And so there continue to be a lot of questions about the policies that will be part of that program, as well as what will happen with the PDD waiver. So those details are provided for your review. There was some question about the disparity between the service rates and the actual waiver, the PDD waiver, and having the autism state plan service rates be higher than that, and having discontinuity of services with providers because they might want to not provide the lower rate services and just move to the higher rate services. So with the renewal that was submitted on May 5th, there is a calibration of those rates, so it wouldn't have a disincentive for providers to just discontinue services for kids in the waiver as the waiver transitions out. Are there any questions about that? I know I haven't gone through every detail in the report, but I wanted to be brief.
I do want to point out that our enrollment in the PDD waiver has gone down dramatically. So you may want to speak a little bit about that.
So, so as you see on the other sheets, the number added to the waiting list for the PDD waivers, the slope is decreasing, and then the pending list is going up, and then enrollment in the waivers kind of going down. And so some factors associated with that is that, as the autism state plan services began some time ago, as individuals wait time out of the waiver services, they're able to stay with the same provider and move into the EPSDT state plan services that are in place right now. So in other words, their funding changed, but their provider didn't. And so after they've received 3 years of their waiver services, they can continue with the same provider. So that changes our provider supply, the DHHS enrolled provider supply, as well as just the demand for waiver services. If that makes sense. Any questions about that? I'm finishing up that.
You might as well stay up there for the tag team.
Yeah, would you like me to stay for this one as
Yeah,
well?
you've got the slides, and then I'll get some spots.
Okay. Well, so we have, Dr. Shamey and I have a third presenter for this one as well. So at one point, we'll ask Mr. Maley to step up, he's on deck as well for this. Because of his ties with the State Inspector General report, and he fulfilled that role. So I'll give some details about advancements to the DDSN quality assurance process regarding incident management, because it's important to kind of think long-term about what we're doing right now and how it will potentially affect reporting and how the system is evolving and changing. So I have a variety of elements to discuss with you. I jotted down about 3 elements of the system to discuss and about 5 quick summaries of action that we have in place or in the future. So the first chart that you see in your binders, it's probably the best for you in your binders, focuses on possible personnel actions resulting from what happens during the provider internal review process. So if there is an alleged situation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, a report occurs. And moving to the right, of course, the safety plan immediately goes in place, and the alleged perpetrator is put on administrative leave without pay. We want to make sure the situation during an internal review and as a result of the alleged A&E in a safe situation. So then an internal review at the provider level begins, and that consists of a review of any, I call them artifacts, any records, documentation surrounding any potential situation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Now that happens separate and apart from any of the investigations that the investigative agencies like SLED, DSS, or Attorney General's office would take place. And that they're going to be the ones to talk to the individuals and do those sort of interviews. So this is more of the kind of artifacts around the situation. So during that internal review, they review for improper conduct, policy violations, procedural violations, that sort of thing. And then they make a determination. So although the process began with an alleged abuse, neglect, or exploitation, there may be disciplinary or personnel actions that are taken that are not related to that alleged abuse, neglect, or exploitation. So I think that's important to keep in mind, because it could be that shift logs weren't completed correctly, or equipment might not have been used correctly. So there would be some disciplinary action, and so it would be reported as such. Or if the person was habitually late after they looked at logs and things, those would be those procedural and policy violations. But a termination or disciplinary action, as we report it, wouldn't necessarily mean that there was some form of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. So that kind of gets all mixed up in the middle, the way we're currently doing reporting. So I'll reflect on that towards the end of our presentation today. So what I'm hoping that this demonstrates is that these personnel actions in the process of this internal review may or may not be as a result of the alleged abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Okay. So then, kind of our element 2 and our action, just to recap, we've looked at how we're defining critical incidents, and as you recall, back in February, the Commission approved our separation from true unexplained incidents that happen that are critical incidents from those that are really medical or operational. So that change in reporting, as you see in your reports, is already occurring. And then I'm reflecting in the diagram that the critical incidents, or true critical incidents, will continue to be reported with your incident management system. So providers will use that to get that detail. But then when the FAIR General Event Recording module goes into place sometime in the first quarter of fiscal year 17-18, the medical and operations will happen through general event reporting. So that's an advance and a change that we've done through now.
And with the general event reporting, with their act, that will make it easier, less burdensome on behalf of the provider. The reason why we can't pull that trigger right now is SCDDSN had to make some modifications to ensure that we, as the oversight agency, could still run statewide and provider-specific reports. But right now, even though we're reporting them separately based on y'all's approval from February, the providers are still having to jump through all the same hoops in all the reporting. And so once we can go to the DER, it'll be a little less burdensome on behalf of the providers for those routine medical and operational. So this will be helpful to them and still allow us to have reports.
Okay, so moving on and kind of connecting where we're going here with this report with some of the recommendations from our State Inspector General's review that was most recently completed. There was a need for terminology, clarity, and streamlining, and some additional simplicity. So in your binders, you have some of the types of terminology used by various entities towards the right, the bright blue rectangles. So if you look, I just want to be able to keep mindful of that when we come back to that. So I'm going to run you through kind of a quick example of a situation where abuse, neglect, or exploitation is alleged in DDSN residential setting for an adult. So if you start at the first gray box where it says example, The first thing that would happen if there's an alleged abuse, neglect, and exploitation situation is that SLED would be contacted because the person is an adult, resides in a residential setting. From there, SLED would determine what the next path was. If it looks like a criminal situation, you go towards the top of the graph. You see where it branches off there. And then it could take place that SLED investigates it, local law enforcement, attorney general, with their potential outcomes over to the right. So substantiated, founded, unsubstantiated, unfounded, close, lots of terminology. If it is going back down to the kind of diamond-like shape, if the individual is receiving, if the situation happened for the same adult in a community non-residential day setting, it goes through DSS. Okay, so then we've got other potential paths. The one today I want to focus on is the very bottom kind of row of diagrams. If it was a non-criminal investigation, it would go to, it would be a standard of care, a potential standard of care violation, and so it would go to the long-term care ombudsman's office. And then further to the right of that line, the blue, if a standard of care concern is, it would be verified or considered unverified. So as you can see, it's not a simple path to follow through, to know where to report, to know what, to follow it to fruition. Several agencies could potentially be involved, and then if one agency is looking into it and they determine, like if the long-term care ombudsman's office determines it's really not a standard care violation, there's some sort of criminal activity, then they would cycle it back and go back to SLED. So all of these entities determine the outcome of their investigation or review, and they use different terminology, and that's complicated for reporting purposes. So I say all that to share with you, and again, I think the binders have the best view of it. One of the offshoots and products of the SIG report recommendations is to streamline this terminology, and now you actually can see through the diagram prior how complicated and how many different terms are used. So as part of the recommendations from the SIG report, DDSN can be a group composed of all the entities I just mentioned, and we really looked at terminology, broke out into the subgroup, and tried to converge upon common terminology. And so what that discussion and summary entailed was that there are reasons why those terms are used. And in some cases, like the long-term care ombudsman's office, they have federal requirements to use that the standard of care is verified or unverified. And so, as an example, they have over 101 classifications for their standards of care violation. That's a lot. So in our system, as we talked about it and trying to collapse language, I think that was a really good idea. But that group came back to the larger group and said, you know, here's our situation, and all the stakeholders agreed that DDSN could come up with kind of a conversion system of what the entity, like for instance, the standard of care violation, instead of using 101 verifications or using some other extrapolation, that DDSN could develop their own kind of selection terminology. So through continued conversations with the Ombudsman's office, we'll be working forward with this draft that you see. But for instance, take 100 plus standard care violation classifications and breaking them down to 7 representative reporting class categories that would be used in the DDSN system. So that's yet another move to try to respond to the recommendations of the SIG report and move forward. So we'll keep you updated as we get information about the progress on that. Then last, I have a quick summary on several positive actions regarding compliance with further SIG recommendations that will affect our incident management reporting. So DDSN created a position in response to the recommendations for a risk management coordinator. And so this person has a law enforcement credential and prior investigative experiences And so she is looking at those substantiated cases of abuse and neglect or exploitation, and also those situations that might not have been substantiated but have serious and negative outcomes. So really looking at the system that way is a way to, as a feedback loop, of course, to learn about how to better manage situations to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation to happen, but also do a system check to see if the correct measures were in place. Secondly, our quality management division, through our incident management staff, continues to work with our medical director to review death reports. We continue to look at critical incident reports and do tracking, trending, and analyzing. And also a note here that the statewide vulnerable adult fatality review committee reviews all of those death reports as well. So we continue to try to deepen that process as we move forward. And then last, but certainly not the least important, is prevention. And so one of our endeavors towards spending more effort towards prevention is exploring, looking forward to a learning management system. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with that, but there are online learning management systems where presentations, whether they're videos, whether they're PowerPoints with voiceovers, but a module with content can be uploaded into a system. And then individuals can be enrolled, like students, into that course, receive the content, and then a competency assessment can also be part of that, so that you can assess the competency after training. So one way to focus more on prevention is to making sure that the training requirements are being met and that the competency assessments are being completed. And so while that's a move forward, we also want to look into some flexibility for those providers and staff that need in-person training rather than kind of that self-serve, any time of day online training. So those are things we're moving forward with. And at this point, I'd like to just ask Mr. Magley to come back up and kind of give some general comments about any additional impact of these changes and kind of the view of managing at a systems level. So will you come up for a couple minutes?
Right. Thanks for having me again. I'll just, I'm not intimately involved with the day-to-day changes, but I haven't been involved with it before. I get involved at discussion level. And I guess just from my perspective, when I look at DDSN and systems of abuse and neglect, is we have a lot of controls of SLED's involvement, independent investigation, hotline, criminal exposure if you do not report. We have a lot of good controls that would make a good system, but I think the missing element that Susan touched, that explained, that really makes a strong system is that back-end feedback loop. Is all the controls you put in, the question is it working? And the best evidence of is it working or not is close examination of bad outcomes. And I think what DDSN did before was they deferred to law enforcement, and we really didn't have a good understanding of an after-action analysis of bad outcome. And I think the new system emphasizes that with a new employee who has the capabilities to go out and do that, so that when you have bad outcomes, you can get lessons learned, because if you're really going to prevent it, you actually have to have the data to support, hey, there's a problem here, it's the third time we see it, and now we're going to policy changes. Also, people learn from other people's mistakes, and I think if we can develop that and give assurance that things are working, and that some of these bad outcomes may just be bad outcomes that may not have precursors. But if we have the precursors, I think we need to fix administrative accountability, if not to the provider, as opposed to criminal liability to the individual. And I think that back-end component makes the whole system much, much stronger. That's kind of my observation of what we're doing.
One of the things that I was going back up, is I would like the governing body to give a little feedback or input, as the first slide under your tab indicated, the disciplinary action at a personal level, at a agency level, we are uncomfortable with the data as it exists now. Meaning that what we report may or may not be directly related to the A&E. And We have a higher level of confidence in the terminations because they're gonna either happen pretty early in the onset because of direct policy of an individual provider, or they're gonna be as a result of it was substantiated and therefore an arrest was made. And, we tighten up that feedback loop with providers on ensuring that the report is 6-8 months later, that we're aware that we can get that data in the system. But for things like written warnings, disciplinary, other levels of disciplinary action, at the final report, which may be 5 or 10 days after the initial report, the provider may still be working with their HR department to make a determination if a disciplinary action is in fact valid. And if it is, it may or may not be directly related to an A&E, as Ms. Beck said a few minutes ago. And so even within the numbers that we have, they may or may not be directly related to an A&E. So I have a level of discomfort with reporting those numbers or using them as decision-making tools. So I wanted the governing body to look at that to determine what are we going to do with that information. I think there's some validity in continuing to ask the question and track it, because it helps us see that the provider is doing something, if a policy needs to be changed, if they, are in fact taking corrective action with an employee, but knowing that that data has pretty significant limitations. If it is something that the body feels like we really need to get, and then we need to gather that information in such a way that we have a higher level of confidence with the information, which is going to be another step and another task that both at the individual provider level they need to do, and something that the BDSN needs to do, and create a much stronger feedback loop to ensure that that data has integrity, which has resource implications on both sides of that coin. And from a legal perspective, as the oversight entity, it's a little bit of a slippery slope as to whether, now obviously we want to make sure that the oversight entity providers are not employing folks that, have been found substantiated abuse, neglect, exploitation. So the termination factor we feel much more comfortable with, but the other aspects of disciplinary action, I don't know that it's the correct role of DDSN as the oversight agency to get into, well, a written warning versus a suspension versus was it related or was it not related. And so I think from a legal perspective, that is a slippery slope as well. So I'd like some guidance in moving forward with starting in July of this year, beginning of the next fiscal year. How would the governing body like us to proceed with this information? Because I'm uncomfortable with the status of it currently. I don't know that I can speak for providers as a whole. We do have several that let's just say don't appreciate the fact that we asked that question, and will push back in the sense of, well, whether a provider issues disciplinary action to that individual provider employee is the choice of that provider, and really quote unquote none of our business. So there is some pushback on that. It's not universal. It's not everybody. I don't want to give the impression that it is, but there are some that feel very strongly about that. And again, I'm much more comfortable drawing the line at terminations because, and even then you have to know the limits. The termination maybe because they violated a policy for the third time, not directly related to the A&E. But I think we need to gather that information, if for no other purpose to it, but to ensure that when something is substantiated, that the correct personnel action is taken. So.
The next question then is, if we don't do that, how are we going to complying with 6 recommendations?
Well, I think that goes back to that feedback loop of what was done preventative, what was done, and a piece of that puzzle is, did that staff member do something wrong, and if so, what's the corrective action? That may or may not be directly tied to a disciplinary action. It's a little bit hard from a data wonk point of view in reporting that, but you actually get more meaningful results from that closure of high profile versus looking. I think one of the analogies in conversations with Mr. Malley is you've got hundreds and hundreds of dots. Do you focus on every dot, or do you focus on the bigger flashing dots that really can mean and be a potential implication for a system change either at that individual provider, or if you've seen the same flashing dot 2 different times at 2 different providers, then maybe you need to look at it as more of a statewide system issue and some communication and training associated with that. So I think that kind of getting down to the individual staff, disciplinary action level, you kind of miss the big picture.
Well, it may not be, a great way to look at it, but we don't have anything else. So, we can't eliminate this until we develop a strategy that will tell us what we need to know, which is how many people have been accused of A&E and how many people are really committing A&E, so that we can measure, and I'm a firm believer in you get results that you measure. We need to keep up with those measurements, and we need to work on our quality assurance to continually get those down. And I think what you're saying is terminations, you have enough resources to track those so that you feel confident in those numbers, but you don't feel confident in the written warnings or the 3-day suspension numbers. So I don't know how many more resources you have to have in order for you to get comfortable with that. But if it's not related to A&E, then it doesn't need to be on this report. It just muddies everything up. If it is related to A&E, then I think it's worth tracking, because our most important job is to try to keep people safe. I don't know of anything more important than that we have resources on. So, and looking at the data, which I'm sure you're going to get to this time, you can see that one more time, we're up. And particularly in community residential, and if that trend keeps up, just by terminations, which you're confident in, if it keeps up to this year, then those will be up 25%. And the A&E allegation, for some reason, are up in the regional centers and the day programs by 49%, 54%. So, I would not want to eliminate this until another strategy is developed to tell us what we need to know about what's going on.
And with your example of the terminations, and maybe it's another example of just like what Ms. Beck was talking about with the, how do you categorize things within the information, but even within terminations, let me give a kind of extreme example. Let's say there's an employee that slaps a consumer and it's witnessed by 2 other employees. So that's pretty clear. So there's a referral for physical abuse allegation, and it's going to local law enforcement. They're doing their thing. In the meantime, the individual provider says, well, I got 2 eyewitnesses that Johnny slaps Jennifer, and I don't even have to wait. We've got policy in place that says you don't have inappropriate physical interactions with consumers. A slap is clearly inappropriate. We're going to terminate them for a policy violation, and there you go. And so, which that person was terminated for cause, and if they agreed through that individual provider's HR policy, would probably hold up because of the two witnesses and a clear violation of policy. Now, fast forward to the criminal investigations doing its thing, local law enforcement says, yep, Johnny slaps Jennifer, but the solicitor goes, in my grand scheme of everything I've got on my plate, this is not worth prosecuting, which happens a lot. And they kind of go, okay, well, I'm not gonna die on the vine, and it's not gonna go anymore. Technically, that person has not been convicted of a crime, and there was enough cause for arrest, but so is it actually called substantiated? And if that person was terminated because of the substantiated allegation of abuse and it was never prosecuted, that person can go back and say, I want my job back, and it was never substantiated, or I went to court and I was found not guilty. I want my job back, and by the way, I want 4 years back pay in the meantime. And so providers, now there's a thought, sometimes people may be too quick to this, but they terminate for a violation of policy. And so that's a really, really clear example of how that was obviously directly connected to the allegation, but sometimes the examples are much more murky, and sometimes the examples are not nearly as clean. And so there's were they terminated for something related to the allegation versus were they terminated for substantiated abuse and neglect, and that's where it gets really, really muddy. And it's difficult because their HR employees have rights too, and all of those things from an HR policy perspective, which is why we're uncomfortable.
I don't really think we care about all those designations. We just want to know if somebody was slapped, right?
Mhm.
There you go.
So,
I mean, you know, that's what we need to know. It doesn't matter what we call it. I mean, you know, if somebody got hurt. That's the whole point.
and I agree with you, I completely agree with you. Part of the complication from that is DDSN, by the way the law is written and the definition of the law, we cannot be in a position of determining whether that abuse, neglect, or exploitation occurred. That was one of the things that Mr. Malley was just saying, is the strength of our system. There's a separate investigative entity, because it's a legal bar, it's a different bar. So do we want somebody that slaps an individual working in our system? Absolutely not. I mean, we need to call them out and be able not to bring them back, but that is a different definition than abuse, neglect, exploitation. So that's one of the challenges in the current system that we have. And maybe we can get creative and work with providers and figure out a different way of reporting that still doesn't overstep our legal bounds of what we're allowed to do. And we'll be happy to go back to more conversations.
Because closing the examination of bad outcomes is a good strategy. It's gonna need to not be the only strategy.
Okay, so we'll go, just trying to make sure I got my right mark. All the other components that aren't a termination or aren't, I mean, how does the governing, are we gonna still continue to report that in our quarterly reports? Are we gonna try and focus on terminations and maybe try and tease those out with a little bit better description as to the reason? What's the path you guys want us to go down?
You're most comfortable with just terminations.
Yes, but I feel like we need even some qualifications
Right,
with
well,
that.
like you said, whether they are putting a prosecuting and followed through or the case is dropped. I mean, I'm personally comfortable with that, and what you just said, to say, wow, it's a policy, you know, what the example that you just gave, about the policy termination versus the never was followed through criminal.
Yeah, the scenario that I gave, you know, there could be enough just cause for arrest, but then it never goes
Right.
into those levels. Does the commission need to vote? Okay, all right, so we'll look at that and work with providers on. Yeah, and we'll continue to ask, because I agree with your philosophy of sometimes when you ask a question, that in and of itself changes what someone does. So I think we'll continue to ask, but not included in the report, to try and tease out terminations a little bit tighter. We'll work with providers on coming up with that. That's what I needed, thank you.
Can't get rid of me. Okay, may I?
Yes, you may.
Okay, fourth report for me and then I'll be quiet. In tab 6, we have the beginning of the reporting for incident management, including abuse, neglect, and exploitation, social incident, and death. You all have had this information in advance and highlighted a couple of things. So the reporting is just kind of reorganized, to freshen things up a little bit. But at the beginning, you have a review summary with updated data points, referring to why we report the way we do, how we track, trend, and analyze, some updated data points there. On page 2, some details about DDSN's review of the reports, and then the last section, critical incident reporting. And you see on the pie charts on the right on page 2 that we are, again, reflecting the new way of reporting critical incidents, separating out the operations and medical. So I'll leave that as that. And then I have a traditional month-wise reporting of the 3 areas of report, as well as the 5-year trend data. So just to recap a little bit, I think that Commissioner Thompson in the earlier agenda item was focusing on the page about allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, the 5-year trend, is that what you were looking at with community, or where were you? You said there was an increase in allegations.
Yeah. But it was basically from last year.
Oh, from last year, okay. So, this one, that I'm referring to, it's the sheet that looks like this. Sorry, they're not numbered, I'll work on that next time. Is our 5-year trend, data for allegations of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and it refers to community residential day services and regional, centers. And again, allegations are just those reports. So, a report is made when a person, has some information, report, any bit of information that appears to be abuse, neglect, or exploitation. It doesn't necessarily mean that an actual incident of abuse, neglect, or exploitation occurred. It's just there's a suspected, alleged situation. So as we look at those numbers and whether they're increasing or decreasing, that's one thing to keep in mind. The number I would spend some time looking at, of course, is always that rate per 100 to see if it's going up, if it's going down, where that's looking, and then of course the substantiation. So first it's alleged, and then it may reach a situation of being substantiated or unsubstantiated. Refer back to the blue column and some of my other diagrams with all of the classifications of outcomes. So I just add that point, as well as if you look at the underneath there, the number of staff terminated, and so that's mixed in with those policy violations that might not actually be part of the alleged abuse, neglect, or exploitation, as we talked about quite extensively today. So you all have this report, so I'll be glad to answer any questions about it or elaborate on anything else at this time.
Susan, just to reiterate here, the reason that we're looking at termination to start with any other disciplinary actions, which I think we should be looking at, is that you have to be arrested for it to be substantiated. And that doesn't mean that nothing happened anyway, it just means they weren't arrested for it. And I don't know how much of that goes on, but that makes the termination and the 3-day suspension and all that stuff, it makes me want to look at that more, because something happened to somebody.
I think the earlier conversation about, and this is my synopsis, I don't get it wrong, but if there was an alleged situation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and the internal review happened, and there was an actual termination, and knowing the reason for that termination, was it related to the abuse, neglect, or exploitation? We get right at what you're talking about, because it may not eventually be substantiated or not, but they could be terminated, and we're trying to figure out why. The thing that's so complicated with how we report now, as I think Dr. Duchovny was stating, first of all, it's kind of voluntary on providers to have their personal information that they're sharing. So, we have concerns about the completeness of data, but we also currently don't really know if those disciplinary actions were really connected with the abuse, neglect, or exploitation situation. So it's kind of confounded, because it really isn't, it doesn't mean anything happened just because an action was taken. So if we can purify that data through how we collect it and any sort of requirement to collect it, it'd be more
Then
meaningful.
you just looked at it. I mean, we need to know.
I'm ready to go.
Good morning, Cap 7. Analysis. It's a follow-up from policy subcommittee meeting that happened a month ago related to the $200 threshold for commission approval. We were asked to go back and look at comparison data between fiscal years as to how increases have taken place over the years between the provider contract awards from one year to the other. So what you have before you is a report that demonstrates those variances between contract awards between providers from one year to the next. We got a 4-year process here. We're looking at 14 to 15, 15 to 16, and 16 to 17. This shows a cumulative sum value of all the contracts we would have with one provider organization as their contracts change. We might have 6 to 10 contracts with an individual provider, but this is all rolled up into $1 amount for those fiscal years as we compare data between each fiscal year. So if you go through the report, get to the last, we show what this analysis shows is that over those 4 years, we've had 129 providers will be contracted with for various service needs within our system, 129. For the 14 to 15 comparison year, 58 providers had a sum increase of $200,000 or more. So 58 of the 129 had increase of $200,000 or more. From 15 to 16, there's 21 providers that have some increase of $200,000 or more from their beginning contract to the ending contracts of that fiscal year, of those 2 fiscal years. And then from 16 to 17, there are 35 providers that have some increase of $200,000 or more. So like I said earlier, most providers have multiple contracts with the department for various services they're providing within our delivery system. Some 6 to 10, maybe might be more than that in some instances. Some of those contracts might go up by $200,000. Some of them might go down by some related number, and all of them could go up. It just depends on the volume of services that provider is taking on within our delivery system. If they're wanting to expand in residential services, or they're growing in at-home services, or whatever, where they might grow within their organization over a year's time frame. So this information is presented for your viewing comments.
The only comment I have about that is we have a policy that says that anything that's over $200,000 we have to vote on. If we don't live by our policy, we'll probably get sued by something because we haven't done it. So that's just the bottom line. I mean, when you have a policy, you're supposed to live by it. So.
And Commissioner Ravenel, that's why this is on this agenda, because historically, when it comes to direct services, and the reason why these contracts are changed, other than the General Assembly gave a cost of living raise and we have to change the contract, or a rate for something was changed, we have to change. There's some things that happen system-wide. But other than that, the reason why these contracts change, and there's a lot of yellow on this page, is because we've been in a world of service expansion. So we're getting thousands of new people into service delivery, and those thousands of people have a choice, which, by the way, Medicaid requires, a choice of their service provider. And I choose Apple DSN board versus Banana private QPL. So I am approved for services. I'm getting however many hours of this. I get to choose my residential provider. I get to choose my day program, my personal care attendant, my respite, all of those things. So this list of providers for DDSN, unless it's one of those system-wide things, these dollar amounts are changed, and some of these dollar amounts are 1.3 million, 4.1 million. And so it is because of service expansion, or somebody moves. They used to be served by Apple DSN board, and they weren't happy with that, and they wanted to get served by Banana QPL. And so it is based on consumer choice. And so number one, from a process and workload point of view, this is not, the stuff on this page is not, we decided to increase the contract with USC to do this by $500,000. That is not what this is talking about. These are for contracts for provision of services, and the individual providers are chosen by the people who are receiving services. And so one of the logistical complications is, A, you're talking about having to do this every single month for a list of 15 providers, which potentially could delay services. And I have concerns that if a provider is in good standing and can receive referrals, our agency cannot and should not deny referrals to a given provider unless there is a specific reason. And if that's the case, then, we freeze that provider, we stop referrals, we go through Medicaid to have them removed, whatever the case may be. I don't think we as an agency have the authority to deny referrals to a specific provider. We would be violating consumer choice, and we would be violating the Medicaid requirements of said consumer choice. So while I agree with you guys knowing what's going on, and we can give reports, so that you know on a more frequent basis how contracts change. But I think it's at a very, very slippery slope and potentially violating other rules and regulations if you guys get to the process of deciding whether a provider can expand their business by $200,000 because you're denying choice.
Well, this is my only problem. When you have a policy, you're supposed to stick by it. And that's the bottom line. You have a policy, you're supposed to go by. If you don't like the policy, get rid of the policy. The problem is the commission of the people who get sued. You're our employees, so you won't get sued. But if in the event, that someone wants to sue us, they're going to sue us, not you. So therefore, I think if you don't like the policy, throw it out the door. But if you have a policy, I think you have to stick by it. And that's what, every person I've talked to, and I've talked to some people outside of our commission and everything, they said, the bottom line is if you have a policy, you got to stick by it. We don't care what else you do. And if you don't like the policy, throw the policy away. So this is where I'm feeling, I'm the boss, and these are the rules I'm supposed to live by. And if I'm not living by the rules, then I got a problem. And everybody says, okay, well, it's no big deal. We never had a problem yet. But if somebody wants to sue us, we're the ones who get in trouble. So, I just feel you got to live by the rules. And if you don't like the rules, get rid of the rules. So, that's just the way I feel. And I've talked to other people, and if you don't live by the rules and you have a problem, that's when you get in trouble.
And
in my life, I always get caught. I don't know about you, but I always get caught. So if I don't do something right, I'm going to get caught for it.
And Commissioner Ravenel, I think you bring up a very good point, that the way the commission policy right now is written is a very broad stroke and very generic, and it could lead, we've got how we have operated in the past versus what we're doing now versus what we're doing in the future. And I think that it could lead to confusion for someone, because functionally, we have not done this for service expansion and increase in contracts. So the reason this is on the agenda today is to follow up from a committee conversation, but I completely agree with you in the sense that needs to be clarified. The commission needs to make a decision. Is this a process that they want to do in approving, which will end up being on a monthly or more frequent basis every time contracts change?
This is what's happened, okay? We have approved this 2 or 3 times, and then all of a sudden, every time I have a policy committee, y'all bring it up and say, let's vote on it again. Well, we already voted on it twice, and it got approved that we were gonna, anything over $200,000, we were gonna have to approve. And then all of a sudden, yeah, we're bringing it up again. This is, 3 strikes we're out. Why are we bringing it up over and over and over again? It's kind of like when I was a kid, and my mom wouldn't let me go out. And I kept on asking her 3 different ways how to go out, But Mom, I didn't want to work. But Mom, she's a nice girl. But Mom, I have my own money. We have voted on this twice. And now now you don't want to do it. I mean, we've already done it 2 times, and this is the 3rd time. I just think it's redundant. It's a waste of time. We said we're going to do it, and let's follow through and do what we say we're going to do. As a commission, we voted on it. And every time we vote on something, y'all don't like, y'all bring it up again, see if y'all get the vote. It drives me crazy.
Eva, let me ask about this report, just a couple of things. What service is Winston's Wish providing?
That was one of autism grants that we got special money for in 15 and 16 related to expanding autism services throughout the state.
Does that have anything to do with the person choosing the service, doesn't it?
And the commission approved that.
Yeah, those are all approved.
Those grants.
That was $1 million. One was $2 million one year, and the next one was $1.1 million.
Highlighted in yellow, but let's go to USC screening. The commission approved $999,000. And you've got on this report for 2016, you've got on this report $1.35 million. That's a difference of 353,000. Didn't you just say it wasn't about expanding contracts with USC?
I use those as an
That's
example.
exactly what it's about.
Well, it depends on what part of USC. We've got different contracts with different things.
Well, we're not, either one of them are not, you know, it's not like people chose, you're always, you know, Johnny chose to go there, so we have to let him. What's happening here, according to the report you sent out, is you've got a lot of contracts on here, and you've got a lot of changed amounts from what we approved. Because I compared it to what we approved in 2016 and what we approved in 2017, and this is not, the numbers you sent us aren't what we approved.
They were the beginning numbers that you approved well, the commission approved in June of the month prior to the new year opening up. And throughout that year, changes were made, and then we start with the new year that we established for the upcoming year, and that's what you approved in the following June. So it's a gap of a year of awards, and then it reaccumulates those numbers and gives you a new fresh number for the next fiscal year going forward. So it doesn't change during the year.
In your opinion, why do we vote in June on these contracts?
Because officially you have to have signed off on these contracts to be awarded to our provider network.
But we don't. All these yellow things are things we didn't vote on.
You approved the spending plan.
Oh, God, I don't. It's in the spending plan, they lose it, don't give me back.
You approved the expansion of our service delivery system.
Yeah, I know, but you know what? This financial report that you sent out, you can't compare it or verify it with contracts set on the comptroller general site, like this ECM or whatever this is. You can't compare it to what the commission approved in contract. What you can say
You
is
can
that.
go back to the June of those years and get those, these numbers come out of those reports that you approved as the commission approved.
We never approved 30, how much for Babcock Center, 37 million you got, you know, we approved 27 million.
What year are you looking at now?
I'm looking at 2017, approved by the commission, and you total those up, it's 27 million, it's not 37 million. For Charles Lee, it's 22 million, it's not 28 something million. We've got, community options is 1.9 million off. GeoCare is not even on your list. Don't they provide a service for everyone? You've got Jasper with over $6 million to somebody called Jasper Fiscal Agent. I don't even know what that is. They're a small county. Why are they getting $9 million?
They provide our fiscal agent process for 4 of our waivers.
They do, and where did we vote on that?
It was approved 15 years ago.
It's been jumping every year.
It's been growing.
It wasn't on our contracts we approved.
The waivers have been expanding, so that service of self-direct program has gone as well.
We approved 2.2 million and they're getting 9 million. Don't you think you ought to run that by the commission at some point? I mean, you know, this is why we need to vote, because we don't know what's going on, like in this report, that it's not a very good report for what we're supposed to be looking at it for. We're supposed to be looking at what we approved in 2016 and what we approved for 2017, and how many times as a commission would we have to vote in between? And it's so cumbersome, and people would be dying in the street if we actually had to vote for anything over $200,000, and that's just not true. But I agree with Eva, and Katie's the lawyer in the group, so maybe she could shed some light on this, but if you're a board who has a policy and you don't follow it, to me, you're more liable. I mean, you gotta follow your policy, or you gotta change the policy. So until or unless the commission changes the policy to say, because right now, it says, and I know, Eva, you're right, we bring this up every time and we keep talking about it. But what does it say? The executive director, the state director will bring any contracts or purchases over $200,000 per fiscal year to the commission for approval. It doesn't say the state director will bring any contracts or purchases over $200,000 per fiscal year to the commission for approval, except expansion of USC or donations to Winston's wish or risk or whatever it is, or except for contract expansion.
with providers. So therefore, we're in violation of our policy. That's what we're saying. And that was the point of this exercise. The point of this exercise was, is it going to be too much for us to follow our policy and vote on anything over $200,000? I don't think it is.
Has the policy committee made a recommendation? Is this a recommendation from the policy committee?
No,
Okay,
no, it's not.
okay, well, this.
We did not, Bill, we did not make that recommendation. We discussed it, all it was discussion, and that's all.
Well, this commission today, I understand, and that's a good discussion. Clearly, you feel strongly about it, so this commission
But
today.
the thing is, this is the problem. We have voted on it twice, since I've been head of the policy committee.
Okay, then I would think you would back a policy recommendation next month for this board, for this commission, to vote yea or nay on whatever policy change or policy condition that you come up, that comes out of that committee.
I would vote for anything that's over $200,000, because that's what we decided to do twice.
I understand, I understand.
So I will not on the policy committee even bring it up, because it's not necessary, because, you know.
Clearly it's necessary.
You ain't going out, you stay in home tonight, because you did whatever. So, we voted on it twice, I think we don't need to discuss it anymore. Y'all need to just bring us anything that's over $200,000 and go on to the next project. Listen, we got lots of other problems besides that. We got 10,000 people on the waiting list, and someone just called me this minute, sobbing because their child just graduated, going to graduate in 2 weeks, and they had nothing to do with it, and what can I do about it? And I'm like, I don't know. But we got 10,000 people on the waiting list. And it makes me madder than a hornet's nest. Yeah, a child with autism who has been in the school system and they're not part of our policy, I said, please tell this, or you tell no.
Oh, yes.
And we're worried about this. We need to worry about these people on the waiting list. Let's do our job and quit, being redundant. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
My request as the state director would be that the commission, whether it's in this meeting, whether there's a policy committee in between and it's voted on again, I am indicating that if the position of the commission is to vote on every contract that is a service level change, and I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Thompson, as far as better defining that and what that we have a policy. My recommendation would be that policy needs to be clarified, to be very, very clear to the reader as to under what circumstances, if Ms. Ravenel, if it is all and across the board and in every change of every amount, then that needs to be more clearly articulated. If it is the exception of service expansion based on individual choice, then that needs to be articulated, and that individual policy needs to be fleshed out to be descriptive of that. While obviously, as the governing body, as your staff, I'll bring whatever you guys want to you, but my advice from a legal perspective and from a compliance with Medicaid perspective and from a compliance with consumer choice, that is an incredibly slippery slope, and y'all would be very difficult to justify denying a contract of a provider, an increase in a contract of a provider that was in good standing with us and Medicaid. You have very little justification for denying the expansion of a contract based on consumer choice. And if that is the case, what is the point of the process in doing that of a service contract? So my request as your employee would be to make that decision. What is that point at what level? Is it everything? Is it under certain circumstances? And clarify that policy as written so that it is very clear to myself as your employee, to y'all as the governing body, as your membership evolves, and then to Joe Blow reader, the public who pulls it up on the website and wants to know what the rules are. That would be my recommendation.
And just to be clear, my understanding before Vicki asked the specific questions about the providers that were on here was sort of the number is somewhat fluid.
But you have this one lump sum that is kind of fluid depending on where the consumer elects to go.
Yes.
And therefore, it almost deems itself impossible to know, it's not like you're just, we're not thinking this contract, people are choosing it.
Correct.
It's not a DBS. So I get that. But then the argument was, are there people or providers on this list where that's not applicable?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And there are, we included all, but the example of Winston's Wish, that was money that was specifically received by the agency. We were instructed to issue grants to individuals, providers in the community that were in the autism world. That was presented to the commission. It was approved by the commission, and those contract amounts with the Jasper. And I understand that I think that we can bring things like this more in the open, but that is part of the cost of the waiver services. That is a provider that performs that function with the fiscal management entity for that within the waiver service. That function has expanded as waiver services have expanded, but that is separate from direct service provision. And I think that's a very good example and a good point that we can bring forward, but those are included in the numbers for waiver expansion. When somebody gets awarded a slot, a little part of that goes towards that contract with Jasper and Charles Lee to perform that function, which is directly connected to service provision within the waiver. Those just happen to be the two entities that are doing it. And if they don't do it, somebody else has got to. So.
And Geo here, which is part of Commissioner Thompson, is a procurement to a PO, so it's not done to a contract purchase order. It's a different process, how to procure that service, pursue other services.
They're providers, aren't they?
They're not a qualified provider
No,
for
they're not
DBSN, they are placed
They're
in
not
site.
on the list.
Well, they were on our list when we voted. You put it on
Yeah,
our
they
list.
were. Yeah.
Well, why?
Well, because we wanted to be transparent, give you all.
There are other examples that we do to the procurement, particularly some of the teenage placement services that go through, and some of those are from that,
Right.
not us, so we need to build the same match for it.
Right.
At some point in time, though, we ought to figure out, and I've asked for this for 2 years, but it's gotta be possible. But, this is how much money we're given. This is how we're gonna spend it, line item, not general. And then, we track how we're doing on that, which, is what you're about to tell us. But it's just hard to verify anything anywhere. It's hard to follow where the money is going because it's just here, there, and everywhere. And we have the rules and we say, well, it's choice, and then the USC increase didn't have anything to do with blind choice.
There's a few on there that have.
And there were over spending authority, which, the changes were over spending authority. So, if we're not gonna, I don't see the point in us voting on contracts at all, because it doesn't have anything to do with what actually happens with the money. So, it's just messed up.
These are questions for legal counsel who is not here today. Because I have some.
She's not legal
No,
today.
and I have some questions regarding that myself, so I think we all know how to feel about that, so let's move on. Is that okay? Okay. Tom, spending plan.
Tab 8 of your binder. This is an update through the third quarter of the fiscal year for the 2017 spending plan. It was approved back in September. It shows where we are in meeting some of these goals of financial goals for the 2017 year. Department's on target to meet most of its goals on this spending plan. And a large percentage of this relates to our base expenditures that we provide through our system, and then the other component of it is the new money that we receive in the fiscal year. The current year we're in, we got over $9.3 million in new state money, which attributes to about another $25 million in Medicaid earnings that we add to our delivery system. So most of what's on the below the second half of the page is related to those expansion efforts in our system as we move forward with residential development and at home placements and the waivers and some other initiatives that we're doing with that $9.3 million. So the first top of the page is the base expenditures. relates to the community contracts that were approved back in June of 16, related to the 17 awards that took place beginning July 1 of 16. And also shows the regional centers operation budget and the administration budget, showing $619 million where we stand through the first 9 months of the year. We're right at $600 million in spending levels based on what we committed or what we actually expended up to that date. Another 20 million, most of that relates to the regional center operations, related to personnel and operating costs of running those 5 campuses throughout the state. The next section is our development. And those basic expenditures do not include the pay raise or any of the expansion effort. That's just the basic expenditures that we were when we went into the beginning of the fiscal year. The next section is service development, related, like I said, residential development and home expansion, and then statewide initiatives that we're doing throughout our delivery system. The first part, residential development, we're on target. Community movement from regional centers, we've done 10 placements so far this fiscal year. The goal is 24. We are trying to develop in-house models. David's working on that initiative to develop these residential facilities in the community to take more people out of the regional centers to place.
Also, critical.
Yeah, so it's a mixture, but some of that's going to help meeting that goal as we move forward with that initiative, which we're moving forward with. The second part of residential development is the community residential. We had a goal of 125 or so new beds that we were developing in the community. For this fiscal year through March, we developed 74. We got another 40 in the pipeline of the houses are being pursued and purchased, or construction is going on to develop those beds to move those people in the correct waiting list into service delivery. So we should be meeting that goal by the end of the year, as our expectations are. Next part is the home services. That's related to the waiver at home slots that we've allocated to authorize and expand more people to get services in our system. Passkey, we did 10. We've done all those 10 slots. We also got some money for the post-acute program for the TBI and spinal cord injury. We got $500,000. All that, we're up to $3.1 million currently in that initiative, and we're going to spend all that money by the end of this fiscal year. We already have, I think, basically obligated all the money now. Autism spectrum disorder, out of the 750 slots that we have approved for moving forward with expansion of home slots, autism got 82 of those slots, and then the ID population got 668. All 750 of those slots have been authorized and been people are being enrolled in those slots. As Susan and Pat were discussing earlier, we got some hiccups. We're trying to get those people in. With that, knowing that we over-authorized that commitment by another 750 slots somewhere back in September, October, I believe, and trying to get the churn into our system to get to that level as quick as we can. We're close to meeting that goal. We've got, as of end of April, we're at 583 of the 750 slots have been, a new person has been enrolled. So we got 583 out of 750, so we're 80%, 75% there. Then we go on to consumer needs as our individuals in the community needs change medically or behaviorally. There's a request from our provider system to additional monies to help take care of those people in those settings. So we had $600,000 in regards to that, and that money has been allocated out to our provider network for those needs that have increased throughout our system. Statewide initiatives. The pay increase, 3.25% pay increase that went in effect in July. All that money, $18 million related to that throughout not only the providers, but also our regional centers. All that money has been allocated out. Other initiatives, expansion of non-emergency respite beds. Y'all voted last month to award Lincoln County Services that non-emergency award. They're in the process. We'll start when they.
In June.
Okay. So we had a solicitation when we had that one provider that came forth and presented a proposal for us, and moved forward with that initiative. Premium genetics, there was $500,000 in state money allocated to the department to expand neural tube defects and genetic counseling. All that money has been passed on to Green Genetics for their efforts in those initiatives. Capital needs, we had 2 lines there, one for non-state and one for state owned facilities. Pretty much we spent all the money for the, or committed to spend all the money for the non-state facilities, the 2.4 million, 2.5 million, and then we had debt service money, 3.9 million. Projected, we spent through 3/4 of the year, right at 1.6 million, through contracts that we're engaged in and construction that's going on throughout our system for state-owned facilities. And then the last one was the Lander money that was passed to us, which we passed on to Lander for their initiative there, $300,000 that has been granted onto Lander back in the fall. So as part of this meeting, it's mostly as goes, it's a few that are lagging in meeting the full expectation of the goals. Hopefully we'll get there by the end of the fiscal year and move forward in the last quarter of the year. Okay, and then we'll move on to the second page, unless you got questions on that page. Okay, second page gives an analysis of the $6.6 million. Like I said, we got $9.3 million, 6.6 of that related to the waiting list reduction effort. And that's just some state funds that would grow based on the earning power of earning $8 of that up to around $18 million or so. So we had to use that money. We had 2 basic elements we were going to use it for. One-time initiatives, because we knew that July 1 we wouldn't have all 125 people enrolled in residential settings that we projected for that use of that money, or the 750 at-home slots at July 1. So we knew we had some one-time money available to spend in our system to help develop capacity or help other ways to get these people enrolled into services. So we had 7 different initiatives to use that $3.4 million for one-time capacity issues. And then we projected about $3.2 million for service expansion as these individuals got enrolled throughout the year, whether it was July or December or March or even in May or June. We projected what we thought we would spend on those people entering services at different periods of time throughout the year. Our projection was around $3.2 million. So out of the $3.4 million for one-time initiatives, we spent through April 30th of this past month, right at $2.8 million, a little bit over $2.8 million. And we have right at $500,000 left to spend for the last several months of the year of those one-time initiative monies. You can see we're over in some, right on target on other ones, and we're under on some of the other initiatives. But total, we're right at about $500,000 that we have spent through April. Then on the expansion efforts, like I said, we had $3.2 million we projected we would be utilizing through April. We had 89, through April, we had 89 new beds developed from July through April in our residential capacity growth. And we've had 583 new at-home slots that have been awarded from July through April. So those dollars, based on when they came in throughout the 9 months or 10 months, the money's projected on how much we spent based on when they came into services throughout those 10 months. So 1.9 million for residential and 1.2 million for the at-home. So we're spent right at 3.1 million. We have 100 and some thousand left over for the last several months to get those remaining people hopefully enrolled by the end of the fiscal year. So that's how that money has been spent so far this year, 6.6
There's a couple things I'd like to point out more as foreshadowing for future conversations. One thing is if we were projecting at the beginning of this fiscal year 3.2 because of the waiver enrollment process, as you know, we've been really working very diligently to try and get people enrolled quicker. We've outlaid double the number of funded slots. And so the good thing is that we've actually been more successful than we were originally projecting at the beginning of the fiscal year, getting people enrolled and actually spending the funds for services. The flip side of that point is if you look, the math doesn't work with the 2 months left in the year. And there are also several things that we are funding currently with one-time funds that are created because of waiver waiting list reduction efforts. Going into next fiscal year, we're not going to have new funds. And so there are some things we are doing directly related to waiver enrollment, like awarding state-funded case management. And if you look at that line, that is in fact, with 2 months left in the year, we're already spending significantly over that projected amount. And that pot of money that is funding that will not be here or will be exponentially smaller next year. Some other things that we're bridging with one-time funds, the current intake process and paying the providers for that. And then some of the other things we're single-time funds, but it will reduce the amount of funds available for capital projects next year because we don't have this source of one-time funds going into next year. So the commission is going to have to make some decisions on what we're doing in the upcoming year because we will not have the same source of funds for some of these initiatives that were considered one-time initiatives. The one that I think is probably the most, or two, that would be particularly problematic from a service delivery point of view is the state-supported case management that we're giving providers to do some of the enrollment process. That's the funding stream. So if we stop that, we're probably going to have even more problems getting people enrolled, into waivers. And then the intake process, there's not right now an identified source of funds to pay for that. We're bringing in one-time funds. So just kind of foreshadowing, these are some problems we're going to have moving forward that we got to figure out.
Report?
I have a couple.
Okay.
Lutheran Family Services, $500,000. Does that all go to Lutheran Family Services, or does CDDSN get an administrative portion of that?
No, they eventually go to all of the different services as they get those 4 beds up and rolling and get people start providing the rest of service to those people. Now, we know that right now, the 4 probably won't, based on the rate we worked out, we're gonna wait and see how this works out, and we're gonna solicit maybe another provider. We're still gonna have a little bit of money we think we can play with.
We won't spend money right now.
So, hopefully, after we get it loosened up and that this process works and we got statewide, we can bring another provider in. And we're probably gonna have a couple $100,000 available for potential more beds somewhere else in the state.
But the short answer is there's not a percentage that's
No,
taken
no,
off
no,
that for the DSN operation.
Okay, and on capital, projects, debt service, $2 million balance. 2.3 million balance, and we have 3 months left in the year. What are we doing with that?
It stays in those projects. It's those projects that are approved, that have to be used for current improvement activities.
Spares,
Spares, right.
okay, so we got how much in there now?
10 million.
Okay, and I'm just wondering on revenue, when providers' contracts are changed, or they have to pay back money, say for vacancies, where is that money in here?
It just comes back into the flow of our,
Where in the flow is it? Is it?
well, it covers the gap in not providing that service that we can earn Medicaid. Then it helps us to balance our books, because without having the revenue from Medicaid, then we have to pay 100% state dollars. So it's the shakeout of.
So do you show it as a revenue, or do you show it as an expenditure reduction? Where in here?
It would come as a revenue.
Okay.
Is that right, Marty?
Depending on what year.
Okay, there, yeah, so previous years ago, it might go into a offset.
To a revenue if it were from previous years. Do you know how much that is every year?
Probably less than $500,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the third page. Was that, this kind of gives a synopsis of the capital projects. We're doing things, last time we reported was in December, where we were with some of the initiatives that the U.S. Commission has been asking us about. The first page on page 3 gives a quick overview of where we've gone since December. We've closed 13 projects. 2 projects are in the process of being closed. 6 projects are being prepared to be closed in the next several weeks or month. And then we had 9 projects that were just opened back in March, that were approved back in May or April of last year, the 2017 CPED process. Through the third quarter, we spent right at $360,000 in expenditures related to projects that are in the process currently. The next page is demonstrates the active projects that we got going on right now. We got 48 active capital projects that are for our state-owned facilities under a community in our community or in our 5 regional campuses. So that's what these dollars are being used for. 48 active projects for preventative maintenance, ADA compliant upgrades, health and safety related issues, and life cycle replacement needs. And so we've been working with executive directors downtown to come up with a quicker, better process to deal with some of these smaller projects. Because a lot of the money that we have in these 48 projects are for preventive activity. They're small in nature. Might be a roof repair, or might be a air conditioner fails, and or a ADA compliant bathroom needs to be reconfigured or something. So we were working with the executive budget office to try to come up with another process that maybe we could not have to go downtown and go through that rigorous process of having the review process and going through the WRC and going through the SPA and all that. So they've agreed that for these smaller projects that we have in place, we've had to develop CPIP projects to do, that we could have a separate account in our SCDDSN accounting system that can identify some amount of money that we use for these non-capital related type activities. So less than $100,000. So anything over $100,000, we still go through that process. Anything under that, we go through this other process. It would be more expedient to get things done, be less cumbersome and moving forward with activities. So we're moving forward with that decision that y'all had asked us to move forward with, and also with the budget office approval, and state treasurer's office approval as well. We're trying to get that in place for July 1. And so some of the activity you're seeing on here, it relates to that, us closing projects and using that money in this special account that's going to be classified as non-PIP maintenance fund. That's how it would be transparent. It would be on our SCDDSN accounting. And we would bring it back to y'all every period of time. We say 6 months, giving you accounting of what's being spent in that account for you to have some review of what's being allocated out of those dollars. Okay, so the next page, page 4, relates to all the closed projects. There's 34 projects that are on this list here that have been closed over the last year. 34 projects that have been closed or in the process. We got 2 that are in the process of being closed. So it adds up to 34. So there's a lot of activity going on, and either of those projects have fully been, the scope of it was fully completed, or and if it was completed, there was some residual money left over, and that money was either transferred into another project that needed some extra money or put back into our debt service account. Okay. Next page is the page 5, which shows the projects that are over 5 years old. There's 8 projects on this list that are over 5 years old. They're still out there in our system. Several are ongoing maintenance needs for our state-owned facilities. Several in the work to get under construction, and one of those, the last one, will be closed and moved into that non-PIP maintenance fund that I talked about previously. But some of these will need to be stayed open because the scope of the projects that's identified is a needed item within our system, like the paving of roads and site work. That's continual need on our campuses. So that money, $77,000, will be used up in either some sidewalk or paving needs within one of our campuses over the next, or one of our community facilities in the community to be used for that. Renovations and replacements of air conditioning systems or whatever, that's one that needs to be stayed open, and that money will be utilized in the months and years to come. So 8 projects over 5 years, one of them will be closed, and the other ones, based on the significance of what the scope is, we need to maintain those projects until it gets down to a minimum amount, and we can close it out and move the remaining value into another project. But 3 of them are under construction. The coastal gym floor replacement and then the energy maintenance system, the regional, that's for 9868, that's under construction right now as well. So then we go to page 6, 6, 7, and 8 are the projects that are 5 years and less that we're putting out there. And then this reflects a total of 40 projects on these 3 pages. 9 of them just been, like I said earlier, have been added since March, or in the process of being added based on the 2017 CPIP that was approved back last year. Some of these will be closed. As you can see, we've got notations beside them as to which one will be closed and moved into the account. And the other ones will either be reduced considerably and moved into that and closed out, or return to be closed out as well. We just didn't have time. We got till now, until July, to figure out which more of these projects we can probably close out and eliminate and move into that non-HIP maintenance fund. So we got a total of 40 projects that total up to right at $11.8 million, and we got $9 million remaining in that budget balance for those 40 projects. 9 of them, like I said, have just been established last month. The last page, page 9, relates to community infrastructure contracts, awards that we give out to our network for non-state owned facilities. So you see here for residential, there's been 26 new developments in our system to try to deal with the needs in our system for more capacity for residential services in the community. $2.4 million related to those 26 projects that we have done or in the process of finishing up. 14 different providers that have come forward and asked for residential dollars related to non-state facilities. And we got 6 projects that are on the works for data and administration needs within our system, totaling up $1.6 million, so right at $4 million of capital expenditure related to that either have been expended or we're projecting will be spent out by in the fiscal year. Hopefully, if everything works out, might be some lapse of those dollars as we finish out the remaining several months of the year. So it gives you kind of a synopsis of where we are with the capital funds. Any questions? Okay, you go to tab 9. That's your monthly financial reports. And it's the first one, the cash position report through April. Our 4 operating accounts that we report on, and it shows that between the funds that we carry forward into 17, the 2.3 million, and then shows the revenue that we were appropriated to us that we earned over the last 10 months in regards to our service delivery system. And the cash on hand at the end of April was right at $595 million. Revenue that we have received either through appropriations from General Assembly or through earnings of Medicaid and other smaller earnings that we receive. And expenditures related to personnel, fringe benefits, and other operating expenses is right at $531.7 million through the 10th month of the fiscal year, showing our cash balances at the end of April at $3.5 million. That we have for the remaining 2 months of the fiscal year. So the department is well positioned to move forward in the last several months of the fiscal year to meet our obligations and pay all our bills, and we're projecting maybe a little small surplus, not much, as we end out the fiscal year and paying out all the needs of our system to deliver services to individuals who need our care. Second page is our budget versus actual report that comes off of SCDDSN, the statewide accounting system. It shows the first column of the original budget shows what we were appropriated in the General Assembly. We got approval of at the beginning of the year. It said $728.4 million. And we had new monies that were allocated to us. Mainly, most of that is related to the pay increase that we got for 3.25% of $11 million of new appropriations received after the July 1 start date. New appropriation current budget is $739.5 million, and then it shows expenditures of about $31.7 million that we spent through the 10 months of the fiscal year, which compares back to that cash report earlier. So that's where that stands. Any questions on those 2 reports?
Thank you.
And the last one is an update on the budget process. We're getting close to the end. Things, like we reported last month, things from the Senate worked out well for us. $9 million. Part 1 was approved through the Senate process. Madison Conference Committee We're meeting this week, to try to work out the difference between the House version and Senate version of the two bills. And then once the House committee has done their thing, they go back and get both parties to approve it, and then it goes to the governor. He has 5 days to approve that appropriation bill, and or veto, line veto, items he doesn't agree with, and then it goes back to the chambers for them to vote out the differences of if he vetoed anything, to approve it or not, to accept it. So we're in that stage. We're excited that looks like because both versions, the House and Senate, has a $9 million in it, so that's good. And there's a $500,000 related to green genetics that the Senate has put into their budget bill that the House didn't. That has to be compromised out into two bills. We'll see if that works out. The $9 million will give right at 9% pay increase throughout our provider and regional center system of delivery of direct care staff that have hands-on care to the individuals that they're serving on a daily basis in residential and day services. Not only will it be just for the new hiring, because it's going from a $10.11 hiring rate to a $11 minimum hire rate, but everybody that's affected within the care of individual will be giving basically a 9% pay raise as we move forward into July. Everything stays true is what we're thinking. There's also no health increase, cost of health increase to employees. The state is covering that through the employer's increase in the employer's premiums that the employer has to pay. And there's money in there to cover that in our expenditures for the department. There will be no increases in deductibles or co-payments. There's no across the board pay increase for state employees. There is a $500 projected bonus for people making less than $50,000 in the Senate version of the bill. So that has to be compromised out, and it's also based on if the Comptroller General substantiates, certifies that there's excess money left over at the end of the fiscal year. That won't be known until August or September as the books are finalized and all that. And it is only for state employees. We did confirm that. I think we talked about that last month as well. So we'll have to figure out how that works out through our total network of delivery, how that affects the other employees if they're not state employees. DDSN is thankful for this potential $9 million the General Assembly has put forth, and it will provide for a fair compensation for those people that are in the trenches doing the work every day to take care of people and supervise their needs on a daily basis. We'll keep you informed as things fall out this next week or two. We'll probably know the final results by the end of May as to what works out between the Congress Committee and the governors signing or vetoing, and then they're coming back to rescind or accept the vetoes that he put forward. So we'll keep you informed as we get closer to the end. So we're almost there.
Thank you for that update.
Yes, sir.
Item on the agenda is I'm going to need a motion to discuss contractual matters with the AHS to go into executive session. Second. All in favor, say aye. 10-minute break.
Before everybody breaks, please take note that the June commission meeting will be in Georgetown. So Georgetown was partly chosen because it is an option for video conferencing. And so we will have the commission meeting broadcast in this room, but we will be off location in Georgetown. But as of right now, it's still scheduled to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. But we will be video conferencing to the regular locations, including this location.
Should be good.
Are we good to go?
Should be.
Okay, thanks very much. We are out of executive session, and there have been no votes taken. And our next item on the agenda is the regular meeting for June. Do you want to remind everybody that it'll be in Georgetown on June 15th, 2017. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.